this one. It's so lovely to see you all. Hello and welcome to this morning's Mission Marketplace. This is a space for you to come and hear practitioners, really, to talk about what they are passionate about. And I've just got a right treat for you this morning. I've got Kevin and Sue Pellatt, and I've got Siggy Parratt-Halbert. They will introduce themselves in more detail, so I don't get that wrong when it's their turn to kind of speak. But welcome, and welcome to everybody. Now, today's theme is outdoor worship, and I have, I'm hoping that this is something that you find useful, and that this is something that you can take away and feel inspired by, but also able to inspire others. To think about outdoor worship. The possibilities are endless, I can see already from the slideshows that have been shown this morning, and I'm very excited. I'm recording this session so that we can publish this on our Darlington Methodist District YouTube channel. I'm also wanting you to have an opportunity to ask questions. So could you please put them in the chat function? I'm hoping you know how to use that. And then at the end, I will pick the questions and I will put them to Kevin and Sue and Siggy, and they will respond to you on those. Yes, and that's it. I'm just making sure that you've got everything. So let's begin. Kevin and Sue, would you be so kind and kick us off this morning? Thank you.
You muted us.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us, and it's good to see you all. I think I know most of you there, and I think most of you are familiar with me, and from various meetings that we've had over recent Zoom in the days of Zoom. So it's good to be here. Sue and I have been involved with Forest Church for a number of years, and so today we're going to explore how we've used outdoor worship as a part of mission. So again, I encourage you to use the chat facility for any questions that might arise, and then we can pick those up, because we can talk for ages, and Sue will talk with a great deal of enthusiasm for ages, and but it's about you picking up on the things that you want so that you can integrate them into what you want to do. So we'll tell you our story and how we became involved in outdoor churches and some of the activities we've enjoyed. So look forward to hearing from you on the chat facility. It all started with an invitation to help a local school with forest schools. And so I do make the mistake, and I'm often jabbed in the ribs for mixing up the word forest schools and forest church, and because for me they're so interchangeable. But I started with forest schools, and I took Mickey out of the other teachers, sort of suggesting when I had training that we'd be wrestling crocodiles in the River Swale, Bear Grylls style. But you can go down the Bear Grylls style route. You can also go down the Ray Mears, which is a bit more sedate. It's about what you want to do. So what is forest schools? And I know several of you will already know this. Forest schools originated in Scandinavia, and it has very much a green environmental agenda, and so that is something you might be able to tap in on when you're looking around your environment and trying to get outdoors. It has an inclusive ethos. We find in the activities we do, it's a great leveler and brings everyone together. And oh, come on.
Sideways.
It worked earlier. I've got a slide here that's There we go. Right. The whole idea of forest schools is that it grows the whole person and they develop into the best person they can be with the skills and abilities that they have. It's not just academic, it's very hands-on, it's very active, and it engages all the senses. And we can talk about whole, heart, soul, mind, and body. And if you look at this slide here, whilst it shows a load of youngsters, I will hasten to add it's for people of all ages. But here we got the youngsters, and they just love being blindfolded. That bit of sensory deprivation, I think it is, because they're blindfolded, they got that element of jeopardy. They don't know where they're putting their feet forward, and being blindfolded, they need to communicate and hold on to each other and work as a team, and communicate, listen as well as speak clearly and hear what's going on. We encourage people to, in an ethos of can do rather than can't do. So there's an element of risk taking. Let's take a risk, manage that risk, and from it, if we make a mistake, well, we make a mistake and we learn from it. We can debrief it and see what went wrong, what went right. So, and what's more, there's permission to fail. So if we get it wrong, that's fine. We'll learn from it. We move on. And in that sense, it's very supportive, where we encourage each other to do things that maybe we're not sure about, and so forth. There's also, and this is where I think it diverges a lot from traditional church, traditional school, is that there's permission to go off tangent. So if someone's learning something that's not entirely within what you want, that's fine, as long as they're learning and growing. And there's that freedom to explore and see where different routes take you. So how did we take forest schools into a church context? And it wasn't difficult to do. Now, those that know me know I am not one for sitting in classrooms. I was press ganged into school at the age of 5. I didn't really want to start learning probably until I was 16, 17 or 18, and certainly not learning sat in a classroom. And it's the same with church buildings to a large extent. And I learned differently. I learned by doing rather than being spoken at. And I came to faith not because of what anyone said, but because of what they did, the way they lived their lives and the examples that they provided. And I thought, I want some of what they've got. If that's how it affects their everyday living, that's what I want. So the Forest Schools approach and Forest Schools ethos made entire sense to me to use in our church context, in our faith context. So now, a bit of a spoiler alert. Siggy's going to show you a picture of a book that Siggy, Sue, myself, mainly Siggy, put together about outdoor church. And the introduction to that book, I'm going to quote to you. Beyond the windows and 4 walls of our church building lies another world. Beyond that, a solar system. Beyond that, a galaxy. And beyond that, a universe. We, as Christians, believe every single particle of this bears the DNA of the God we worship. What would we learn about our God if we peeped through the window to the creation beyond, or even stepped outside and experienced with all our senses the majesty of God? So, to me, sitting in that church, and it is personal, sitting in that church in a building, to me, limits how we can experience God. And by moving outside, I find that I can grow as a Christian. I can experience the wonder of creation. I can experience trust, communication, and the bonds between us as Christians, as the people we relate to, and people we link to in our community, in our daily lives. Those bonds can grow. And we can learn what makes us tick. And I think, going back to when I became a Christian, the actions of people around me, I saw what made them tick, and that is what appealed to me, that made me more inquisitive about my faith. So in short, by taking church outside, we can share with others, and we can grow into a relationship with Christ without having all the trappings of an institutional church, such as language, rituals, and the cursed jobs. Context is all important. It's important to look at who, what, and where are the needs in your community. What type of event will they come to? What time of day, what day of the week? And for how long will you be able to keep them occupied? So outdoor takes us out of the building, quite obviously, but it's not just a rural thing. As many of the things, we use a fire pit, so we can have a fire pit running. That's not going to burn your playground, your tarmac car park. You can lay on the ground and just watch the clouds go by. It's brilliant. It's until someone says you really ought to be doing something more useful, Kevin. Look around, see what's around, trees, take notice of the flowers, have a look at the weather and see how that changes. It's generally rainy in Yorkshire, but you do get different sorts of rain. And or even just gather some sticks in preparation and take them along and get people to make things out of sticks. It's not difficult. And two more things. Fires and food are always a winner. If you've got a fire and you've got some food, especially s'mores, chocolate, marshmallows, people will flock to you. And that's for everybody, all ages. I love chocolate, and I'm well on past my childhood. So chocolate will get them in. So I'm going to let Sue talk enthusiastically about all the things we've done.
Okay. So let me first of all remind you, because this is so important. I mean, we came from the city, from Derby, and yeah, we went into Forest Church at that point anyway. But what if we went back to Derby now? What we would do there would be totally different to what we do up here, simply because of the context. And the things I'm going to talk about are the things that we are doing up here. We live right at the very top of Swaledale. We're the highest village in Yorkshire. There are 8 of us. That's right, 8 people live in this village. And the area that I suppose we sort of cover is 12 to 15 miles long and a couple of miles wide. So that just gives you a bit of a feel. And there are 1,500 people live in that area. So it was very much an ecumenical thing that we do, in that we found that we weren't aware of a space that we could use. But then we found Caroline, the vicar at the Anglican church. When she arrived, she had bats, not in a belfry, but in a church. And so she then wanted to move things along, because what she did was she did a conservation project. So this was one way in. This was a way of making links. They'd got a conservation project with the bats. They then had a conservation group would meet once a month, recording the gravestones, recording what trees were there, what flowers were there. And we wanted to move it on so that there was a more spiritual side to it. And so she welcomed us with open arms, and we've worked together ever since. You can see the honey there because we also have bees. Another link that has been sort of made, now I know Rishi's there in the middle of it all. We spoke with Northallerton URC because they'd set up a community project called the Secret Garden. It's a fantastic community project where they took some old land next to the church and they've created this fantastic garden that produces fruit and veg, and different groups meet there. And they wanted to move it on. We had a conversation with them, and they now do some Forest Church activities that will go out there. So that was another link. There's all sorts of things happen up the Dale, and we knew, it must be 4 or 5 years ago now, the Tour de France was going to be coming through right past the church gate. And so while we were doing our Forest Church activities, we put things up in the churchyard so that they were there for everybody to see. The race was going straight past, quite literally, the church gate. And so people would be wandering through. So the children drew on yellow round plates, obviously bike wheels, etc. And we were able to put quotes and Bible verses that were appropriate up there so that other people passing by could see something of church, really, you know, just as they happen to be there. Another link, I suppose, that we have as well is that we have Swaledale Festival for 2 weeks a year, where there's all sorts of music, international music, up and down the Dale. The church is used as a concert hall, and because you don't get a seat number, people queue up for half an hour before the doors are opened. Well, they're just standing there on the pavement through the churchyard. So we've put things next to the footpath so that anyone and everybody can see. A lot of what we do, it tends to be almost like one-off themes, things that other people might be interested in. We did a brilliant one where we talked about labyrinths, and we talked about labyrinths, and then we went out and did. And you can see one picture there that's made up of the needles that had fallen off a tree. I used the sweet chestnuts that were lying around and did a big one on the grass. But to make it so that it was inclusive, we had things like the Lego there, so that we've got the little Lego one, so you could walk your little Lego person around your labyrinth, or Play-Doh. There was one family that we'd not seen before with teenagers. They went off around the churchyard and they found these huge logs that they brought back and made into a labyrinth. We even put one up during Swaledale Festival so that people could actually stand by it and look at it and read the information about it and use it if they wanted to whilst they were waiting. Right, I have to put another one, I think, because I'm running out of time. We always have the fire, but again, we try and link things to the theme. So we did the Easter one. One year there's a little Easter garden, so we tidied that up while we were talking about the story to start with, and then we had all these different activities based around the cross, and you will have seen on the first slide somebody actually got the drill out and made a wooden cross. We also discovered that daffodil leaves actually make very good palm crosses. We just had activities out that anyone could access at any level. The bottom one was our Christmas one this last year, and the church were doing Follow the Star, and so we had it's not bamboo, I always call it willow. We had sort of 5 or 6 foot lengths of willow, and we made this star. We found some little lights that are battery powered and wrapped them round and hung it in a tree, so that the community could see it every night as they walked past. We also made little ones that people as individuals could take home, and it was an opportunity to share the Christmas story. Another one was round about Easter time, and we did an installation. Always worth getting locals involved. We got an old tabletop 12 miles up the dale. We got the local farmer to bring it down. It gave us an opportunity to talk to him about what we were doing. And we made one of these things with the words, one of these shapes. We put the cups round with one that was fallen over to make people think about the story, and Judas. It brought it into the churchyard so people didn't have to go into the church building. It gave us a chance to, I suppose, work with the families, but also there was something there for people that were just passing through. This we found on our holidays, like the other week, only a couple of weeks ago, we walked through a churchyard, and these were outside, and so, oh, take a photo quick because we need this for Forest Church. These stones, some would have had Bible verses on them, some have got pictures on, some have just got comments that people want to make. But people can respond to what you're doing on these, and then they're left for other people to see. A big thing that we've done, because that's what is the need here at the moment, is Caroline had people wanting to do a confirmation class, Caroline the vicar. And so we put together a series, but they were for the whole family. They were for families. That helps with your safeguarding because you've got the family there with the child, but also the double whammy is that the parents are listening to what you've got to say as well, and you're sharing. Just look at that child there laid on the floor. He's getting on. He's absolutely focused on what we were talking about. Some of the older people obviously standing around, moving on to the next thing. Child there, though, carrying on, learning, experiencing what he's got to do. The Bible thing, Bible books we laid around, hid them round. There are still 2 missing around the churchyard somewhere. Hung all the books up in order so that we could talk about the Bible. Movement, action, and then some thinking and processing. What's next? Quick. I know. Oh yeah, and we took them out, trust, faith, and we went up a climbing wall. Most people got to the top. I was really proud of myself for getting 6 foot off the ground. So proud of myself. So yeah, you know, everybody accesses it and gets what they really need from it. And this is where we come to our list of things.
Okay, just quickly go through this. Kate Botley was on Stories of Us, which is on a Sunday morning, and if you can't find it on a Sunday morning, have a look on iPlayer, on the BBC iPlayer. Stories of Us, episode 4. There's 10 minutes from 48 minutes onwards about Forest Church, and it's interesting, again, to just give you another aspect of how somebody else runs Forest Church. We've got our contact details there, which I'm sure we can get out, and we've resurrected our Facebook page for Across in the Wood, and each week we're putting on a different activity for people to do whilst we can't, well, I say we can't meet physically, but at the moment for us it wouldn't probably work. So just to draw things to a close, I think what you need to do is ask yourself, what do you want to achieve and with whom? And then work out what's going to work best in your setting with the people you've got available and the people you want to reach. So anyway, I hope you've found that useful, and use the chat facility to get yourself plenty of questions in, and I'm sure we'll have a look at them later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Sue. This is really interesting. I love the analogy of fail, you know, because that's what actually can happen. You know, things can go wrong and we can pick it up, and that's okay. And I think that's really something that should be transferable to our normal church gathering as well, I guess, on a Sundays. You know, it's okay if the service goes wrong and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's fun. Thank you so much. Siggy, would you like to take your turn?
Okay, I'm going to reiterate a little bit what Kevin and Sue have already said. I'm going to give you some, share with you some of the places where I've done Forest Church to give you an idea that it's across ages. You don't need a garden, you don't need a park necessarily. You can do Forest Church in lots of different places in lots of different ways. And please excuse me if I also sometimes call it Forest School, because I'm from a Forest School background as well. Sometimes interchange the two, not meaning to. So I'm going to share my screen, and a top tip for you to help you see this, to see the slides a little bit better. When the view that you see now shrinks a little bit, you'll see a little minus sign at the top. And if you click on that, the pictures will disappear and you'll be able to see all of the slides a little bit easier. And then I will guide you back into being able to see everyone afterwards if you're still not altogether familiar with all the tech. So I'm going to share my screen now and we'll go through a wee PowerPoint. Okay, so first of all, let's just take, oh, it's going all on its own. Rah. Okay, so we'll take a quick look at what Forest Church isn't first. It isn't an exact replica of your usual church service, but done outside instead. It's quite a different animal, as you've probably already picked up from Kev and Sue's slides. It isn't something with a structure that is replicated every Sunday. There is no pattern. There isn't even a pattern if you deliver the same Forest Church more than once, because it's heavily dependent on the people and what they want to explore. It is really important to plan to the back teeth, and equally important to let go of your planning if you find people want to spend longer on something, or find their wish to explore settles on something different from that which you expected. Go with the flow and let people do their thing. It takes a little bit of courage, but you do get used to it and you are finally able to let go. It's not necessarily worship as we understand it. It's an opportunity to commune directly with God. We rarely get the chance to just build a personal relationship with him in an ordinary service. There are no prescriptions in the Bible as to what a service should look like. So step away from the structure and let the Holy Spirit in. It's not important to sing unless you want to. And the only instruction really the Bible gives is on prayer, but it still says nothing about the patterns that you must follow. He isn't going to kill a kitten if you don't do prayers of intercession. And it's not just for aging hippies either. This is having its mind of its own, this is. Just to let me come out of this a moment. I'm going to just, I think there are timings on this, so I'm going to take the timings off. Right, that might help a little bit. Let's start again a little bit. Okay. I was thinking, what's going on? Oh. So, what it is for all ages, all abilities. It is outdoors, whatever the weather. But be sensible, of course. If it's really icy or it's horizontal rain, you find alternatives. It's okay, but otherwise stay outside. God made the weather too. Just dress appropriately. God isn't going to dip into his basket of kittens if you don't tip up in your Sunday best. It is a less threatening way of exploring God and what he means to people. For many, the church is a scary place, a forbidding looking building where everything happens behind heavy closed doors. But out in a garden or other open space, it really is quite different. So given that you're in a different place, then dare to be different yourself. Put the lectionary to one side maybe, and use the experiences of the saints, for example. And I do this quite a lot in my teaching and delivery. Hildegard of Bingen, who's the figure on the left of your screen here, Hildegard, she was highly intelligent, well known for her visions and for her songwriting. She persevered in a man's world, and her songs are still sung today. So there's a lot we can learn from her perseverance. Julian of Norwich, the figure in the centre, a wise woman, was an anchor hold, an anchorite, but quite literally an anchor in a turbulent world. She also knew a thing or two about hazelnuts. Abbess Hild on the right ran Whitby Double Abbey. So in her day, she was very powerful, very, very well respected. She was a great nurturer and brought several of her monks to bishophood, and one in particular who became a great songwriter and is considered to be England's first poet. All of them have a huge story that translate well into the outdoors. This is a Celtic wheel. Take from the Celtic Christians, if you wish, I do a lot, who they worshipped God through their surrounding outdoor environment. I borrow extensively from their traditions, but please do note that everything I do is linked, it is rooted in the Bible or Christ's teachings or the saints. I am not doing what some folk might call pagan. Just take a look at that familiar symbol in the middle. Where might you have seen that before? Use the seasons and the feast days from the days preceding the Roman tradition. If you look for the old names of our modern festivals, you will find a plethora of material that's brilliant for outdoor church. I'm going to look at just a few examples. They all have saints, flowers, trees, types of moon. Who knew there were types of moon? Or stars or foodstuffs linked to them. Again, all things that God created and all things that you can incorporate into what you do. Samhain is the festival we now call harvest. Yule is the festival we now celebrate as Christmas. Beltane is the festival we now celebrate as Whitsuntide. All Hallows, contentious amongst many people, is now celebrated as Halloween, but it's a festival of light. It's not sinister, it's not evil, it's not bad, it's not about witches and pumpkins. We need to reclaim it as a time of celebrating those who have gone before us and those we have lost. So the festival that it is now is a long way from what it started out as, and it is a Christian festival. Imbolc is the festival we now call Candlemas. Spring equinox is the festival we now call Easter. So the Celtic tradition and the pagan faith as well celebrates life, death, and rebirth. Curiously, Roman Christianity that we celebrate now is also celebrating life, death, and rebirth. So are there lots of links between the way that we celebrate our faith now and the way that we celebrated faith many hundreds of years ago back in the Celtic tradition and even further back then. So there are a lot of links, but you can see all the roots to everything in the Bible and in the teachings of Christ and of God's word. This is a book I use a lot. Kev mentioned it very briefly, but here you go. The Celtic Wheel of the Year. Note the title, Christian Seasonal Prayers, not a whiff of pagan. So please don't worry that just because what I'm talking about is really different from what you might see or experience in a traditional church doesn't make it wrong, or might make it weird, but it doesn't make it wrong. Back in the day, traditions were way more earthy, way more landbound than we are now, because the people were too. The majority of them were farmers and the seasons mattered to them. They understood them way better than we do, and they linked them to God. That was their understanding of their faith. The Carmina Gadelica, which is a collection of Scottish prayers, is full of connections to the land and the sea, because that's where their connection to God was, for other people who lived off the land and the sea. So I'm just going to share now some examples, no pictures with these unfortunately, but just some quick examples of situations where I used Forest Church, just to show you the broad range of people you can work with and the places that you can be. So one was a small village community, an ex-mining village, a lot of descent. They were right on the border of Derbyshire and Yorkshire. So during the miners' strike, half the village was still working because their pit was in Derbyshire and was a private mine, the other in Yorkshire where they were still on strike, and they are still at loggerheads about it even now, 40 years later. So it's a difficult place. But this was one way of bringing all sides together. They carried this out. It was in the dark. It was in an orchard that they had built. And it included prayers around a fire pit. There you go, fire pit. Blessing the trees with cider or apple juice and sharing apple-based foods together. Then I ran a community day. It was part of a community day. It was celebrating the local community and what the local church had done, the way they had worked together. So this was in a community space open to the public, and it was about celebrating the journey of the church and the people in the village. I included using journey sticks, which is a way of remembering specific points in your life when God might have been present, gathering objects and attaching them to sticks, so it becomes kind of like a 3D map. Or asking people to think about where God thinks their journey will take them next. And they cast feathers onto a nearby pond and let it float away. And maybe thinking about God's protection by placing iron nails into a bowl of soil. Iron is a very strong, I forgot what you call it, but it's a strong kind of metal. And it's, even in our faith, iron nails that held Christ to the cross, very potent. And this was held in a community garden, so all sorts of people could see it and all people could join in, people who had a faith and people who had none. But people did come up and they were asking questions and wanting to take part. There were morning prayers for the worship leaders and preachers course, and it was about celebrating their journey to leadership and also about celebrating their faith. So we remembered the Bible verses that had influenced them and made pictures with found objects. This was held in the grounds of Cliff College. This was a starlight prayer for Cliff College students, so this was adults and young people, and it was about celebrating wisdom and the feminine. This was at a time when we had a full moon. It was held at night in the dark on the roof of the college, and using Proverbs 8, we celebrated Sophia, the goddess of wisdom and the feminine. If you're thinking, oh, don't know about that, go and look at Proverbs 8 and wisdom is there. Fighting the shit out of the students though, despite linking everything with Proverbs 8. Then I did telling the story of Jonah, and you will find elements of this in the book that the three of us wrote together. This was with worship leaders and preachers in the Sheffield circuit. I think it was a circuit, not the district. And so it's a community of practice of adults. And we explored the story of Jonah, didn't use the Bible and didn't mention Jonah, but it was about the story, the message that we get through that book. And we did this indoors because there wasn't an open space close by. So I brought lots of natural things in because I'd planned a lot of stuff, brought all the natural stuff in that I thought people might be able to use, and so we replicated it indoors. If the local park had been close enough to get to in the time allowed, then that's where I would have gone. Then I did a similar one to that, but with all ages. So this was with young children, toddlers all the way up to mid-teens and adults. Again, telling the story of Jonah without mentioning Jonah, but looking at the message that it gives us. I've used it in a local arrangement. I've done it in my own church, but I've done it in another one as well. And this was celebrating the time of year. It was the summer solstice, what we might call harvest. So we celebrated the fruits of the summer through St. Bridget. This is her time of year, and her Saint's Day falls in June or July, I think. And it culminated in an agape experience with chamomile tea and honey biscuits. Both are important foodstuffs in the calendar wheel at that time of year. We held this indoors because it was raining heavily and people didn't have the right clothes. But had the weather been good, it would have been in the garden, which is at the front of the church, opposite the street. The final one was at Flourish, which was a district-wide conference, and this was adults and children, and we listened to God through elements of his creation, celebrating him. And we were exploring that through the idea of the tree, the place of the tree in our faith. And we tapped into the trees that were surrounding us to hear what God might be saying to us. So this was in a public space, in a teeny tiny woodland, but it was publicly accessible and people were to and froing throughout. But what's this got to do with mission exactly? Well, it can be held in public places rather than hiding away. You're in full view of people who might ask what you're doing, or kids might even want to join in. It's a super way of getting people to join in with a faith-based activity without them feeling they might catch something, you know, like Christianity. It's a safe space for people to explore where they are with the idea of there being a God. They can engage as much or as little as they wish. Nobody's watching or judging, as sometimes people might do when someone declines to join in communion, you know, heads are turning, oh, what have they done that they don't want to take communion? You don't get that so much in a place like Forest Church. It can be used as a pioneering model, and indeed there has been a pioneer in Cornwall that used the idea of Forest Church on the beach. Don't fall into the trap of talking about Forest Church as not a proper church, or wondering when are they going to start coming to church. Forest Church is their church. It's a proper church to them, and they are indeed going to it. It's not in-your-face Christian necessarily, depends on who you're working with. But if you're talking about mission, it's more like a faith or a spirituality church, which is great when you are offering Forest Church in a diverse community. Any faith person, whatever faith person is, or a person of no faith at all, can come and not feel like you're trying to convert them. There's no weird rules. No one outside traditional church knows about, cares about, or understands all this stand up, sit down, take your money malarkey. I do understand it all and have still been utterly caught out by very high church. It's exclusive and makes people feel horrible. There's nothing in Forest Church ritual, well, not that there is a ritual, to catch people. There's no ritual, they're not caught out. Makes people feel a bit more comfortable. So what do people like about it? People have the freedom to explore exactly as they wish. It's your job to facilitate that and let them, maybe help them to express what they've not been able to express before. It removes the middleman or woman. Communication is directly between the person and his or her God. There are plenty of people who don't really see the need for a minister. Sorry, Richard. And they can talk to God and celebrate with him without someone telling them what to do or what to think or talking at them. For many, it's easier to find a connection with God in a natural setting rather than a building they have no real relationship with. But they might have a massive relationship with their local park or a garden or somewhere local. But it's not for everyone. Some will hate it, and that's okay. Some folk hate traditional church, but it still has a place. And some people will run a mile screaming, "Burn the pagan!" And that's equally also okay. So try it. It is really rather brilliant. Okay, so is everybody able to go back to your gallery view? You all okay? Super. Okay, so I shall pass back to Hella.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. This is very inspiring. I mean, again, one of the things I would pick up is the flexibility, kind of let go of your planning, which is something culturally in the church that we're so stuck with, if you see what I mean, you know. And one of the questions that I actually have that comes out of that one is, you know, how much time does a Forest Church session take? So, for example, people are used to on Sunday, right, between 10 and 11, I'm going to my church, I'm sitting down, I know it finishes at 11 on time. If not, I'll point it out, and then I can go home and go about my business. So what about Forest Church? How much time does that normally take up?
Generally, we've run 2-hour sessions. I know when I've done forest schools, I've run an activity for a whole day, and that worked quite nicely, mainly because it was a bit of a mystery and a bit of a spy espionage, and involved all sorts of different things, but it was outside. And we're looking at, we've found for our context, 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon has worked quite nicely.
But we have also, I have to say, when we went to North Allerton to do a session for them, which, because of the context and the people that were going to be there, was much more, well, formal. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but it was almost more traditional, and it was an hour's worth, but it was still very much Forest Church. So you can make it what you want depending on your context, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. When I've done morning prayers up at Cliff, it's been 20 minutes, but you just plan or pick very carefully what it is that you're going to do, and just one thing, and make it matter. And then there's been other occasions when, you know, I've been given the preacher slot, so it might have been 20 minutes. But then there's other times, like with Kev and Sue, you're given an hour or you've got a couple of hours. So you can very easily tailor it to what you have available.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was also wondering was the frequency as well, but I think you've kind of explained that. Sometimes, you know, you get a certain time slot weekly perhaps, and sometimes not. So I guess the frequency is up to flexibility as well, isn't it? How often you do and how often you meet up with that one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an established Forest Church. I am invited into different places. So I use the Forest Church principle to run prayer sessions or worship sessions. But there are plenty of practitioners who have a regular Forest Church, and it varies. Sometimes it's once a month, sometimes it's every week, sometimes it's like a week-long chunk in the holidays because it's a children's Forest Church. And I think, Kevin, Sue, you've done something along those lines, have you not? In the past?
Yeah, we did do some long ones, but it tends to be maybe it depends on, I've lost the word, what we've been asked to do, really. So it might be that we'll do it once a month for 4 or 5 months with a particular sort of focus, or like with the, you know, the confirmation. And I know I keep saying confirmation, but that was sort of underlying it. That's why we did it, but it was open to everybody and all families to go along to. But then another year, if we were busy with other things, and we maybe just picked out 3 festivals during the year and run one for each of those. So we haven't which is what we'd love to do, but we've not got a regular one that happens every year, every 2 months or whatever, you know.
Yeah, there's a regular one in York. Lassie, she's a pioneer. She had one. It runs directly after the toddler group, I think. So that's weekly. Yeah, I just want to know of this. Well, reasonably local.
Well, there's a question from the chat. What has been your biggest challenge?
Ooh. Do you have one to hand, you two?
Well, go on then. I was perhaps, having done the forest schools and gone, and also part of my background was in training, facilitating training rather than being upfront, prescriptive, didactic, I think is the word. So when working with other people, especially if, say, like we talk about the confirmation membership course, there are certain things that people need to learn, and that can conflict, if you like, or with that freedom to explore, and trying to, when people do go off on a tangent, I think I feel a lot more confident in bringing them back, because I always like to finish with a bit of a debrief, even if it is, what have we learned today, and how will you implement that, say, in the rest of your life, or, you know. So I'm quite happy to let people sort of go off on a flow. And if you like, I suppose I equate it to going on a journey. If I know I'm going to London and someone says, well, let's go down the A6 because there's some interesting buildings on the way, well, that's fine. But if my original intention was to go down the M1, then others tend to think, well, we're going down the M1. And there's no way we're going to go and look at these interesting buildings on the A6, if you get my drift. And that for me is quite challenging. And I suppose another one is, it is, amongst some of the people we know, it is seen as a children's thing, and trying to get, and I think also that trying to get away from the culture, probably in this circuit, in the Dales, is that church is still quite traditional, and I hesitate to sort of say 20th century, because it might just be creeping into it.
But following up on that bit, I mean, I think because ours is all ecumenical, so it's across the denominations, because there are so few of us in the Upperdale, and I think it is very much, everyone's very encouraging, but not necessarily prepared. Church members from across the denominations not necessarily prepared to get involved in it. Oh yeah, you know, you're doing a fantastic job, but the feedback we get from other people, possibly with no faith, that come along, you know, the grown-ups as well as the children, then that makes it, you think, yeah, okay, you know, we're doing something here that's sharing Jesus with other people, and it's finding those little roots, which, to be fair, we have done. You know, when we've been doing a particular topic, we've invited someone to come along to do an activity that you know they've got an expertise in, and so they've popped along to one, and now I'm working out how I can invite them to some more. You know, so that's been a challenge, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the challenge is getting the adults, and it's the same in Forest School as well, giving adults the permission to play can sometimes be quite difficult, and they might look upon some of the activities as is babyish or beneath them. They're adults, they don't want to do this. But once they are encouraged to, and they let themselves let go, they're surprised often at just how enriching it has been for them. So that's one thing, is adult engagement can be tough. Not with people who have no faith, because it doesn't really bother them sometimes. I don't know, maybe it depends on the context. And I think the other challenge is sometimes, because Forest Church is so different, if they haven't had the hymn sandwich, they think it has no worth. And I've done one or two where at the end, well, are we going to sing then? Well, no, not today. And that is difficult. And I guess sometimes the theology that you are using is not always a theology that people are necessarily familiar with. And that can be a little bit of a challenge for people who get a bit scared of what you're doing. I guess perhaps what I'm doing is quite different from what Kevin and Sue do, because I tend to base a lot of what I do on the Celtic saints and the way that they worshipped, which is quite different from what you get in a traditional church. So for many, it's quite strange. And then they feel that this isn't Christian. It is, but if someone has only ever been to a traditional church and that's all they've ever experienced, it's a really big step for them. And it can be a challenge afterwards, like handling some of the discussions afterwards. But I don't mind that actually, because it gives lots of opportunity to explore what faith means, interpretations of the Bible, what is God really saying, or how are we really in being with God, and so that has its worth all on its own too. But it can be a challenge when you're having to think on your feet, because someone else's faith hangs in the balance is in your hands, so you have to be careful how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, the thing about singing. Right now we're not allowed to sing in a church, and that seems to be kind of the huge challenge, or kind of a time for people to get used to the fact that maybe singing, it's traditional and we do it, and it has its part, but now we can't. Then what does that mean? So yeah, that's an interesting challenge. Okay, question, although you don't use traditional worship structures, do you make use of rhythms and seasons, including church seasons?
Yeah, defo, absolutely, because it puts an anchor into what you do with people. But there are so many different ways that you can celebrate the seasons, which is why I was showing the Celtic wheel and talking about Imbolc and Samhain, which were the old names. But if you look those up, say on Google, you come up with loads of different kinds of activities. And yes, sometimes they're on sites that you wouldn't necessarily count as a Christian faith, but it really doesn't matter, because you can use them to explore your Christian faith and look at Christmas in a different way. And particularly with Halloween, a lot of Christians run a mile from it. But if you actually look at what it was for, about celebrating your heritage and the people who had gone before, the people you have lost, your family, can be really, really rich. And there are a lot of flowers and trees and natural things that are linked to all those festivals, and you can make use of that. It helps you to ground what you're doing in nature. But yeah, I like to follow the seasons. What about you guys?
I suppose, yes, we will try it, because we don't do a weekly thing or a monthly thing. We will tend to try and hit the school holidays, because that is our audience within the day. So the youngsters can come along at Christmas, they can come along at Easter, and what others have we done? There was a couple of, yeah. So we'll pick up on the festivals. One I'm thinking about at the moment is certainly a mile up the road from us. The adults, and there are no, sorry, probably about one child in Keld, but they have an orchard, and you've got me thinking now about Remembrance Day. It's really big thing in Keld, and they have a big service, and it is the one service every year that they will come out for. And even forgetting about Christmas, harvest, and Easter. So yeah, we will pick up on those sort of things, and then other events that are probably like the Tour de France or the Stroudale Festival of Music, and just again, it comes back to context. It comes back to context. What are the community going to respond to, and at what time? So, like I say, I've not spoken to Sue about it, so the Remembrance Day thing will probably not happen this year.
Next year.
there's some really nice stuff around Remembrance and All Hallows, and they're around about the same time of year. All Hallows, 31st of October, 1st of November, and Remembrance Day is only a few days later. And sometimes, actually, depending on when Remembrance Day is actually held, are quite close. So the two can be very, very easy links.
Yeah, yeah. I'll certainly be looking at All Hallows as well. I mean, we've done light parties in the past or been aware of them, but I'll have another look and see if we can get a bit more evolutionary.
Okay, one more question. Celtic Christianity did include ritual as well as a closer relationship with creation. Is there something worth exploring here?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were rituals, but it's quite easy to find a lot of that ritual, and you can use, Celtic ritual in the same way that we use ritual in an established traditional church, but you can do it outside, and a lot of the rituals were around outdoors. I mean, Bridget, a lot of hers is around fire and light, and there are rituals around keeping that light going, and there are some lovely stories around that. And her, what did she do? Oh yes, she had a cloak, and it was said, well, I need some land for my abbey, can I have some land? And the guy who owned the land says, well, you can have as much as your cloak can cover. And she lay her cloak down, and it covered acres and acres of land, and it's sort of like a miracle from God. And there are rituals around that, around the cloak. So, and there are rituals around light and cleansing one's soul, if you like. If you look at Celtic daily prayer, I have got one to hand. It's just off the camera. And there are 2 volumes, and there are some really lovely rituals in that, and some lovely prayers as well. Specifically to do as well with times of the year that you could easily use, and they can be indoors or outdoors too.
I think we focus a lot on the Celtic ritual, but I know Caroline the Vicar, she was quite familiar with the Judaistic rituals, and there was certainly a thing around, this shows you how effective Forest Schools is at teaching you, because I can't remember. She did something around unleavened bread and the Passover and sweeping out. We made brooms out of willow, and we were sweeping out and making unleavened bread. And so there was that ritual around the Passover, and so that you can make use of. We've said it before, flexibility within is almost its worst enemy, because you can't put a label on it or tie it down. And in this, which is in terms of Forest Church, you can go where you want with it and use it to your own ends in the context you're in. So pick up on, not proud, use what you can.
Yeah. This is the book I use, Celtic Daily Prayer. It's from the Northumbrian community. And the Northumbrian community also, if you go on their website, they've got lots of little resources that you can hand down. They've got a big one on, I think it's on Caedmon, and a lovely one on Bridget. There's about half a dozen. It's the whole thing to do with your house, actually. So it's rituals that you can perform around the house, blessing each room and the things that you can do with it, which is really lovely, especially if you know someone who's moved into a new home. It's very nice. So when you find one place, lots of other places start to pop up where you can find your material and where you can find your rituals. Ritual is really important for humans. So yeah, I would definitely do what you can with ritual, definitely.
Thank you so much for answering these questions. Are there any other questions? Does anybody have a question that they've not had a chance to ask? Good. Okay, thank you. I mean, I have certainly felt inspired this morning and certainly thought about context. Yes, we have a question here. Dorothy says that they did a service on heart and included house blessing.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Would you like me to put up a slide of books that you can take a look at?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. So Siggy has a slide of all the materials that you can make use of. While that slide is up, if you have any kind of ideas, what you would like to hear next Mission Marketplace, we're going to now have a Mission Marketplace event every month on Saturday morning. Next one is on 14th of November, and it's going to be on the theme of responding to community need. So what I've discovered in the district is that there are several projects that have taken kind of, well, grown from strength to strength through COVID and responding to the community needs. So I'm going to kind of pull together all those people, and they're going to come and talk about their projects and the challenges that they faced, but also the joys of it, and also the results of it, and perhaps looking at the future as well, because once you meet the need, you would need to kind of keep on carrying it through. So yeah, so next one is on the 14th of November. If you have any topics you would like us to cover, then use the chat function again and just write it in there. Perhaps there is something in your mind that you think that would be good if I pull resources together for that one. But other than that, I'm absolutely pleased that you've been able to come this morning, and I thank you for your presence. But this ends the session this morning.